Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a wild topic. 10 countries that, let's just say, aren't exactly rolling out the red carpet for tourists. Locals have reached their breaking point. This is about entire cities pushing back against the flood of visitors that's crushing their communities. Now, before you grab your pitchforks, this isn't about countries hating you personally. It's about places where tourism has gotten so out of hand that locals and governments have said, enough is enough. From water guns aimed at visitors in Spain to Barcelona residents armed with water guns to Venice literally charging people just to step inside and outright bans on selfie sticks in Japan, we're unpacking why these spots are pushing back. Stick around. Hit that like button if you're ready to explore, and let's get into it. First up, Spain. More specifically, Barcelona. For decades, it's been one of the world's top tourist destinations, breathtaking beaches, world-famous cuisine, and vibrant cities that never seem to sleep. But for the locals, tourism has gone from a booming industry to an unbearable invasion. Take Barcelona, for example. What was once a city of charm and authenticity has now become an overrun playground for visitors. Walk through the narrow streets of the Gothic Quarter, and you'll see more selfie sticks than locals. Imagine this, you're a Barcelona local. You wake up, step outside to grab your morning coffee, and suddenly you're surrounded. Tour groups clog the sidewalks, influencers are blocking doorways for the perfect shot, and loud, sunburnt foreigners are stumbling through your neighborhood like it's their personal playground. Annoying? Sure. But now picture this every single day. For many locals, it's beyond frustration, it's displacement. Thanks to the explosion of short-term rentals like Airbnb, rent prices have soared, forcing native Barcelonians out of their own homes. And the frustration isn't just online, it's spilling into the streets. Anti-tourist graffiti is scrawled on walls, protests are becoming more frequent, and some locals have resorted to extreme measures, like last summer when residents took water guns and sprayed down tourists while chanting, "Go home." But the biggest move yet? By 2028, Barcelona will ban all short-term rentals in an effort to curb mass tourism. The message is clear. Spain is tired of being treated like a theme park. So if you're planning a visit, be mindful. Respect the culture, support local businesses instead of tourist traps, and most importantly, remember that you're a guest in someone's home. Number 2 is Venice, the city of romance, gondolas, and a sinking crisis. For centuries, this floating city has been a marvel of human ingenuity. But today, imagine a delicate, centuries-old city being trampled by 20 million tourists every year. Ancient bridges groan under the weight of endless crowds. Narrow alleyways become human traffic jams, and locals? They're being pushed out of their own home. The ancient streets, built for a fraction of that number, have become impassable. Locals who once strolled through peaceful public squares now battle through swarms of tourists dragging suitcases over fragile bridges. For years, massive cruise ships unloaded thousands of visitors daily, overwhelming the city like a tidal wave. Family who run businesses disappeared, replaced by cheap souvenir shops and fast food chains catering to tourists. Rent skyrocketed, forcing Venetians to flee to the mainland. Their home turned into a giant amusement park. Residents openly complain about visitors treating the city like their personal playground, and in some cases, tensions have boiled over into full-on confrontations. They fought back with protests, graffiti, and even direct confrontations with tourists. Signs popped up reading "Tourists Go Home," and tensions boiled over in the historic squares. Finally, in 2021, Venice said enough and banned large cruise ships from its fragile canals. But that wasn't enough. Now, they're charging visitors a €5 entry fee, a desperate attempt to control the influx. And still, locals argue it's just a band-aid on a sinking ship. So if you're visiting Venice, ask yourself, are you helping preserve this city, or are you part of the problem? Because for the people who actually live here, this isn't a vacation destination, it's their home. And they're tired of watching it disappear. So, if you're heading to Venice, don't be that tourist. Stop blocking bridges for Instagram shots, respect the locals, and for the love of everything sacred, don't treat Venice like a theme park. Number 3 is Amsterdam, Amsterdam, the city of tulips, canals, and out-of-control tourists. For years, budget travelers, British stag parties, and rowdy backpackers have flooded the city, treating it like their personal playground. Cheap booze, legal cannabis, and a no-rules reputation turned Amsterdam into the go-to destination for wild weekends. The result? Streets packed with drunken tourists, canals littered with trash, and locals who've had enough. But here's the thing, Amsterdam was never meant to be a party capital. What was once a peaceful, historic city full of culture and charm has been completely overtaken by mass tourism. In some areas, actual residents feel like they don't belong anymore. Their neighborhoods have been transformed into an endless cycle of bachelorette parties, pub crawls, and tourists stumbling out of coffee shops, too high to function. And locals? They're fed up. Over the past decade, things have only gotten worse. Short-term rentals caused rents to skyrocket, forcing many Amsterdam residents out of their own homes. Traditional shops have been replaced with tacky souvenir stands and fast food chains catering to tourists who show up for a weekend of indulgence and leave without a second thought. And then there's the behavior, public urination, vandalism, noise pollution at all hours of the night. For locals, it's unbearable. The backlash is real. Amsterdam has launched a full-blown war against party tourism. Their Stay Away campaign specifically targets young male tourists searching online for Wild Amsterdam Party Weekend. Instead of cheap flight deals, they're met with ads telling them not to come. And that's just the start. The city has also banned public cannabis smoking in certain areas, especially in the red light district. Crack down on illegal short-term rentals to make housing affordable again for locals. Increased fines for public intoxication, urination, and noise disturbances. Actively working to shut down parts of the red light district. Moving sex workers to controlled indoor locations to reduce tourist gawking. It's a clear message. Amsterdam is not your playground. But despite these efforts, many locals believe it's too little, too late. Some argue that the city has already been lost to mass tourism, that Amsterdam's identity has been permanently changed. Many long-time residents have left altogether, moving to quieter towns where they no longer have to deal with the endless cycle of drunken foreigners. So, if you're planning a visit, think twice about how you treat this city. Be respectful. This isn't a lawless party capital. It's home to real people who are tired of their city being overrun. Alright, we're halfway through. Are any of these surprising you? Have you ever felt unwelcome while traveling? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories. And hey, if you're loving this deep dive, hit that subscribe button, because we've got even wilder travel stories coming up. Number 4, Greece. And this time, we're zooming in on Santorini. You've seen the pictures, whitewashed buildings, blue-domed churches, and sunsets, so perfect they look straight out of a fantasy. But behind the dreamy Instagram shots, locals are fed up with what mass tourism has done to their island. For years, cruise ships dumped up to 10,000 visitors a day onto Santorini's tiny, fragile streets. Tourists would flood in, swarming the island's most famous spots, packing alleyways, blocking doorways, and turning every scenic view into a chaotic photo shoot. Then, as quickly as they arrived, they'd vanish by nightfall, leaving nothing behind but trash, overcrowded infrastructure, and exhausted locals. Residents have a name for it: tourist whiplash. One moment, the island is drowning in people, traffic jams clogging the narrow roads, donkeys being overworked carrying tourists up the cliffs, and local shops overwhelmed. Businesses meant to serve the community have been forced to cater only to tourists, making daily life more expensive for those who actually live there. And it's not just about the crowds, it's about survival. Santorini is a tiny volcanic island with limited resources. It doesn't have an unlimited water supply, but with thousands of tourists demanding infinity pools and long showers, water shortages have become a serious issue. Meanwhile, the cost of living has skyrocketed. Airbnb and luxury resorts have taken over, driving rent prices so high that many locals have been forced to leave their own island. The very people who make Santorini what it is, its fishermen, shop owners, and families, are being priced out. The backlash is real. Authorities have now capped daily visitors at 8,000, but many locals argue it's not nearly enough. They say the damage is already done. Santorini has been turned into an amusement park for travelers who come, take their perfect photos, and leave without a second thought for the people who live there. And that resentment? It's starting to show. Anti-tourist sentiment is growing, with some locals openly voicing their frustration about tourists blocking streets, treating homes like public attractions, and showing little respect for the island's culture. In recent years, more residents have started calling for stricter limits, arguing that tourism is destroying what made Santorini special in the first place. So, if you're planning your dream Santorini getaway, think twice. Respect the island, respect the locals, and understand that this isn't just a beautiful backdrop for your Instagram. It's someone's home. Because for the people who actually live here, Santorini isn't paradise anymore. It's a daily struggle to take their island back. Number 5 is Japan. For years, Japan has been a dream destination for travelers. Ancient temples, stunning landscapes, and a culture built on respect and tradition. But for locals, tourism has become a nightmare. Take Kyoto, once a peaceful cultural haven, now a chaotic mess. Tourists flood the historic streets, turning sacred temples into crowded photo sets and disrupting quiet rituals for the sake of a selfie. The worst offenders? Those who chase after geisha and Maiko, apprentice geisha, shoving cameras in their faces as if they're rare animals on display. Some tourists even trespass into private homes just to snap the perfect old-world Japan aesthetic. The disrespect has gotten so bad that Kyoto has banned photography in certain areas, but some visitors still ignore the rules. And this isn't just happening in Kyoto. Near Mount Fuji, one of Japan's landmarks, locals got so fed up with tourists blocking roads, littering, and climbing onto rooftops for photos that they installed massive screens to block the most popular selfie spots. That's right, Japan is now physically blocking tourists from ruining their most iconic locations. But the frustration goes beyond bad behavior. It's about cultural exhaustion. Japan's society thrives on politeness, order, and social harmony, but many tourists arrive loud, clueless, and unwilling to adapt. Talking too loudly on trains, refusing to follow basic customs, and treating Japan like some kind of anime wonderland has worn locals down. Japan's public transport system, especially trains in Tokyo and Osaka, are already packed with commuters during rush hour. But now, add thousands of tourists who don't understand the unspoken rules, blocking train doors for selfies, dragging oversized luggage onto commuter trains, speaking loudly in what are supposed to be quiet spaces. For locals just trying to get to work, it's frustrating beyond belief. It's gotten so bad that certain train stations have put up warnings specifically telling tourists how to behave. And now, the hospitality Japan was once famous for is starting to disappear. More and more businesses are putting up "No foreigners allowed" signs, refusing service to non-Japanese speakers. Some ryokan traditional inns have stopped accepting international guests altogether. Even in Tokyo, locals are less patient with lost or confused tourists, simply ignoring them instead of helping. The message is becoming clear: Japan is tired. So if you're planning a visit, be aware, the welcome mat isn't what it used to be. Learn some Japanese phrases, respect the customs, and for the love of sushi, stop treating Kyoto like Disneyland. Otherwise, don't be surprised if the locals give you the cold shoulder or flat out refuse to serve you. Number 6, Bhutan, the secluded Himalayan kingdom that doesn't just limit tourists, it practically shuts the door on them. Unlike other destinations drowning in mass tourism, Bhutan takes a different approach. They don't want too many visitors, and they make that crystal clear. Their strict high-value, low-impact tourism policy ensures that only those who are willing to pay a hefty price can enter. And by hefty, we mean a $100 daily fee, which used to be an eye-watering $250 per day. The reason? It's not about money. It's about keeping outsiders out. Bhutanese culture is deeply sacred, and many locals fear that too many foreign visitors would dilute their traditions, disrupt their way of life, and bring in unwelcome influences. Unlike other countries scrambling for tourist dollars, Bhutan has made it clear they don't need or want mass tourism. And it's not just policy. It's a sentiment you'll feel on the ground. Many Bhutanese people view outsiders with skepticism, especially those who don't respect their customs. Visitors who come expecting a laid-back, party-friendly destination will be sorely disappointed. There are no backpacker hostels, no budget travel scene, and definitely no wild nightlife. Instead, strict regulations control where you can go, what you can see, and how you experience the country. Unlike other tourist hotspots where locals may tolerate or even welcome visitors, Bhutanese society remains deeply closed off. Strict regulations dictate where tourists can go, who they can interact with, and even what they're allowed to experience. Independent travel? Forget it. Every tourist must book an official tour accompanied by a guide at all times. Straying off the beaten path? Not happening. There are designated routes and locations where visitors are allowed, and deviating from them is a big no. Blending in? Impossible. Bhutanese culture is highly regulated, and visitors who fail to respect local customs, whether it's dressing modestly, following religious etiquette, or behaving appropriately, are immediately noticed and often resented. For those willing to pay and follow the rules, Bhutan is undeniably magical. Towering monasteries, untouched landscapes, and a way of life that remains largely unchanged by globalization. But for anyone looking to show up, roam freely, and treat it like just another travel destination, Bhutan has one message: don't come. Number 7 is Peru. Peru is home to Machu Picchu, one of the greatest wonders of the world, and also one of the most overrun. For years, millions of tourists have flooded this ancient Incan citadel, eager to check it off their bucket lists. But while visitors see a dream destination, locals see destruction. The sheer volume of foot traffic, careless behavior, and disregard for preservation have literally been crumbling the site. And for Peruvians, enough is enough. In recent years, frustrated locals have taken matters into their own hands. They've blocked trains, shut down access routes, and staged large-scale protests, all in an attempt to slow the flood of tourists overrunning their land. Many Peruvians argue that Machu Picchu is more than just an Instagram backdrop. It's a sacred cultural treasure. And yet, some visitors treat it like an amusement park. The disrespect has been blatant: graffiti on ancient stones, trash left behind, people ignoring rules to climb restricted areas for the perfect selfie. There have even been reports of tourists attempting to smuggle out small artifacts as souvenirs. For locals, this isn't just annoying. It's an outright insult to their heritage. The Peruvian government has finally put its foot down. In an attempt to control the chaos, new restrictions have been enforced. Tourists can no longer explore Machu Picchu alone. A license guide is now required. Daily entry limits are strictly enforced, with only a set number of visitors allowed per day. New time slots mean shorter visits, preventing people from lingering too long and causing congestion. And while these measures help, many locals feel they don't go far enough. Some believe Machu Picchu should be closed to tourists altogether for extended periods, allowing the site time to recover from decades of wear and tear. Another major source of resentment? Many locals don't even benefit from the tourism boom. Big international companies dominate the industry, meaning most of the money spent by visitors never actually reaches the local communities. Meanwhile, prices for everything from food to housing have skyrocketed in tourist-heavy areas, making daily life harder for actual residents. To make things worse, some tourists show little regard for indigenous culture. So if you're planning a trip to Machu Picchu, understand this: you are stepping into a place that Peruvians hold sacred. It is not a playground, not a photo op, and not yours to do with as you please. Respect is non-negotiable. Follow the rules. Hire a local guide. Don't litter. Number 8. Iceland. Iceland is a land of breathtaking landscapes, untouched wilderness, and way too many tourists. Ever since Game of Thrones put Iceland on the map and budget airlines made it cheap to visit, this once remote paradise has been overrun. What used to be a peaceful land of glaciers, geysers, and volcanoes has now turned into a playground for tourists who come for the views, but leave destruction behind. Sites like Geyser and Fjargulfur Canyon have been trampled, eroded, and even shut down because too many tourists ignore the rules. People stomp across delicate moss that takes decades to regrow, park their rental cars wherever they please, and leave trash in landscapes that were once pristine. And Icelanders? They're furious. The biggest issue? Iceland's nature is fragile. Unlike other countries with thick forests or hard-packed soil, much of Iceland's landscape is made up of delicate moss and volcanic rock that takes decades, sometimes centuries, to recover once damaged. Locals complain about tourists driving recklessly on icy roads, clogging up small towns, and treating Iceland like some kind of Instagram backdrop rather than a real country where people actually live. Some villages have been overrun, with locals pushed out of their own communities as housing gets taken over by Airbnbs. Many Icelanders now resent tourism altogether, seeing it as a force that's destroying their home rather than helping it. Yet every year, millions of visitors flood in, and many don't care about preserving the land. The government is cracking down. They're discussing visitor limits, stricter regulations, and even higher tourist taxes to slow the damage. Their message is clear. Respect Iceland's nature, follow the rules, or don't come at all. So, if you're planning a visit, don't be the tourist Icelanders hate. Stay on the paths, respect the land, and remember you're a guest in a place that locals are desperately trying to protect. Number 9. Thailand. Thailand is a country of breathtaking beaches, lush jungles, and vibrant culture. But for many locals, tourism has become less of a blessing and more of a burden. Take Maya Bay, for example. The iconic beach, made famous by Leonardo DiCaprio's movie The Beach, was once a paradise. But thanks to mass tourism, it was completely destroyed. Boats clogged the waters, tourists trampled the delicate ecosystem, and the coral reefs wiped out. It got so bad that Thailand had to shut it down for years just to let nature recover. And it's not just Maya Bay. Islands like Koh Kai Nak have lost 80% of their coral reefs because of careless visitors stepping on them, taking pieces as souvenirs, or throwing trash into the ocean. Pristine destinations have turned into overcrowded, polluted tourist traps. The truth? Many Thais are, while tourism brings money, it also brings disrespect. Foreigners barge into sacred temples wearing nothing but bikinis, treat local customs like a joke, and act as if Thailand exists solely for their entertainment. In places like Bangkok and Phuket, locals have started openly resenting tourists who come to party, get drunk, and leave a mess behind. Some have even protested against mass tourism, demanding stricter regulations to protect their home. And Thailand is cracking down. The government has introduced limited access to fragile sites like Maya Bay to prevent further destruction. Eco rules banning plastic waste, stepping on coral, and touching wildlife. Hefty fines and arrests for tourists disrespecting sacred places. So, if you're visiting Thailand, respect the land, the culture, and the people. Because while Thailand may still be welcoming, its patience is wearing thin. And finally, number 10. The Philippines, specifically Boracay. Once a tropical paradise, Boracay was completely wrecked by over-tourism. What was once a pristine island of white sand beaches to an overrun party hotspot, packed with drunk tourists, trash, and environmental destruction. By 2018, things got so bad that the government took drastic action. They shut the entire island down for 6 months. No tourists, no businesses, nothing. Why? Because Boracay had turned into what the country's own president called a cesspool. Raw sewage was being dumped straight into the ocean, coral reefs were being destroyed by reckless visitors, and mountains of trash piled up everywhere. And the locals? They were furious. Many blamed foreign tourists for treating their island like a disposable playground, showing up to party without a care for the damage they left behind. Others were frustrated that their home had been turned into a tourist attraction first, and a livable place second. The environmental destruction wasn't just a crisis, it was a direct attack on their way of life. Now Boracay is back, but with strict new rules. There are caps on daily visitors, smoking and drinking on the beach are banned, and authorities will kick you off the island if you break the rules. But for many Filipinos, the damage has already been done, and resentment toward careless tourists still lingers. So if you visit, tread carefully. Follow the rules, respect the island, and don't treat it like a dumping ground. Because Boracay stands as a warning of what happens when mass tourism spirals out of control, and locals will not tolerate it happening again. And there you have it, 10 countries where tourism has hit a breaking point. If there's one thing to take away, it's this: travel is amazing, but it has consequences. So be a responsible traveler, because nobody wants to be the reason a city starts handing out water guns. Have you ever traveled somewhere and felt like you weren't welcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more eye-opening travel stories. Until next time, safe travels.